Hey guys, so today I will be showing you how to make a floating name widget above the character. This works only for dedicated servers, and we're gonna make it work like if another character leaves our range, their name is gonna disappear from our screen. And you can set this to be any kind of widget you want. It doesn't have to be a name. It can be a progress bar, like a health bar if you want. So this is how it looks. Um, since when we are inside of these borders, the name is there, and when we leave, the name disappears, and when we enter, the name appears again. Same thing happens here, and we can also change names. It's dynamic. Okay, so let's get started. Go to our new project. This is a third-person example project, and the first thing we need to do is create a widget. So let's do that. Let's make a UI folder. Inside, let's create a widget blueprint, and let's call it floating name widget. Let's open it up, and first thing we need to add is a vertical box. Set the anchors to the center of the screen, and set position X and Y to default, and also set alignment to both X and Y to 0.5, and check size to content. Okay, the next thing we need to add is a text. So let's add it to our vertical box, and let's change it to like default name. Let's also change the name of the variable to name, and we need to check is variable to true because we will be changing this variable. So this is what will appear on our screen. So let's go to our third person character and then into viewport. And what we need to do here is add a component. So let's do that. Let's add a widget component. And let's call it floating name widget. Let's position it here. And we need to set space to screen and then widget class to floating name widget. Compile and save. Okay. So what this does is basically if we set space to world, this is gonna spawn our widget in the world, which we do not want that. We only want the widget to spawn on our screen. So it's not gonna exist in the world. Okay, and let's try it out. Set number of players to 2 and run dedicated server. Let's open up a new editor window. And as you can see, the names appear, and the same happens here. Let's get rid of this guy. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is go to our vector viewport and add another component. So let's click on capsule and type sphere component. Oh, my bad, sphere collision. And let's name it sphere collision as well. So this, let's set the scaling up to like 30 on every axis. And this is going to be our range in which we see other players' names. So you can change the scale to whatever you want. I just set it to 30. And the next thing we need to do is go down to collision and collision presets, and let's change it to custom. Set everything to ignore and then only pawn to overlap. So this is only going to generate overlap events when we encounter a pawn. We don't want any of this other stuff. And let's also make 2 events. So scroll down to events and call on component begin overlap and on component end overlap. So this is going to create the events for us in our event graph. Okay, so let's do this. Let's make it so that when we leave our sphere collision, the name is going to disappear first. So let's do that. Let's drag from other actor and say cast to third person character. And what this does is when an actor leaves our sphere collision, we're going to try to cast it to third person character. If they are a third person character, some code is going to run. If they're not, it's going to fail. And let's drag in our floating name widget. Let's say get user widget object, and let's cast to our floating name widget. So essentially what we're going to do from here is we need to notify the other actor, give them our floating name widget, and say, remove it from your screen. And to do that, we need to make a custom event. Now let's call it remove floating name, and we need to add an input, and the input type is going to be our floating name widget object reference, and let's give it the same name. Compile and save, and let's drag from our third person character cast here, and let's call this event remove floating name, connect this up, and then pass this reference as input. So from here we're gonna say switch has authority, and also gonna call is locally controlled. Connect this up, drag from our floating name widget and say set visibility, and let's set it to hidden. So essentially what this does is we check if this only needs to run on our computer. This should never run on the server. It only needs to run locally, and let's see if it works. So one more thing, let's go to our sphere collision and uncheck hidden in game just so we can see the borders, and when we leave, the name disappears. Now let's make an event for so when we enter the collision, it's going to appear, and it's very similar. So let's drag from other actor, say cast to third person character, drag our floating name widget, say get user widget object, and say cast to floating name widget. Again, we need to create an event, so let's do that. Let's call it show floating name. We create an input, and it's going to be of type floating name widget. Compile and save, and then let's call the event from our reference here. So let's say show floating name, connect the executable, and then connect the floating name widget to our input. And let's drag from our show floating name, say switch has authority, also is locally controlled, connect it up this way, and drag from our input and set visibility to visible. Okay, let's see how this works. So when we leave the range, it disappears, and when we enter again, it appears, and the same thing happens here. Okay, so now if we don't want our name to be visible on our screen, because it's kind of annoying, so let's change that. Let's do a make a custom event and call it um, hide our name, and let's set it. Let's drag our floating name widget, drag from here and say switch as authority. Is locally controlled again. Connect it up to a branch. You can spawn a branch by holding B and left click on the graph. And then if this is true, we're gonna set visibility of this to false, so it's not visible. And we need to call this event somewhere, so let's call our event begin play, and let's say hide our name, like this. Compile and save, and our name is not there anymore, but it is on another screen, so we leave, it disappears, we enter, it reappears, and the same thing here. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is let's change this default names to something else. So let's delete this, make sure to delete this, and let's go to our third person character and make a variable called name. Let's make it a string, and in the replication set rep notify. What this is going to do for us is going to create a function that executes every time this variable is changed. So when we change our name, like on runtime, this function is going to execute, and we do want that. So let's drag our floating name widget and say get user widget object cast to our floating name widget. And if you remember, we set this text as a variable, so let's drag from here and say get name and say set text, and the text we want to set is our name. So let's drag it in like this, and let's go to our event graph, and let's make a custom event called change name. What you need to do here is go to replicates and then set run on the server. So we only want to change this name on the server, and then everything is going to work properly. Let's also add an input of type string and say name. We set our name here and just connect this up. Okay, let's add a on key down event. So let's add it to P for Peter. There it is. And let's call our change name event. Let's say Peter here. So right now, yeah, okay, let's change our name. As you can see, it updated, and this character still doesn't have a name, so let's give him a name of Peter, and it works. Make sure not to create a binding here, because it's not going to work, and it only works this way. So for instance, when you are loading your data from your database and you want to set a character name, you just make a custom event, set on run it on the server, and then change the variable. When the variable is changed, it's gonna execute this code, which is gonna update your widget, and everyone close to you is gonna be able to see it. And if you want to see your name when you're playing, just don't run this event, and that's pretty much it. So thanks for watching, and hope you learned something new today. See you.